Welcome, everyone. Nice to have all of us here for Radharani on a Saturday morning. And we're celebrating these festivals. We enter into the spiritual world by worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and especially worshiping His devotees, and especially worshiping His greatest devotee, Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Then we increase our qualification for performing devotional service, and this is the goal of life. The more that we develop taste for hearing about Krishna, the more that we are becoming perfect. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, Tava karma kuravita nirvidyata yavata kata shravanadova shadayava najayate. Krishna recommends that until that time that one is able to develop full faith and taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, then one should maintain the status quo. And as we know from Brahma, stane stita shrutikatam tanavan manobirye prayaso jita jito pyasitaistre lokam. You stay in whatever situation you're in now, but add the process of hearing and chanting and doing devotional service, especially distributing Krishna consciousness, because we have Vrindavan, which is Madhurya. It's all sweetness. But in Navadvip, we have Odorya, which means that the sweetness is being distributed to everybody else. They're the same Dham, but just slightly different mood. Generosity is in abundance in the distribution of Krishna Prema from Navadvip Dham, Mayapur, in the 9 islands of hearing and chanting. And of course, in Vrindavan, we also feel that mood, as because there Krishna is appearing specifically to show His pastimes to the people of the world, especially to the devotees, but to everyone else who can then hear about them and gain benefit from that. And we know that in His worldly pastimes, in Bhoma Vrindavan, there's a way in which the devotees also exalt His merciful quality, in that they say, Aho bhakiyam stanakalakutam jighamsaya payad apyasadvi lebegatim datruchitam tatonyam kambadayalum sharanam brajema. Oh, who would take shelter of anybody else except for Krishna, who is so merciful that although Putana, who intended to kill him, came with deadly poison smeared on her breast, he didn't consider the killing part. He just took the highest qualification, which was, well, at least she came as a mother, and she retained liberation by Krishna's special mercy. So that's flowing throughout Vrindavan. And we heard this morning several times about how Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī is the tender-hearted counterpart of Krishna in Vrindavan, by whose mercy we can attain service to Krishna. We never come directly, but indirectly, and through the service of the devotees, that is das, 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 anudasaha, the servant of the servant of the servant, then we consider ourselves servants in the line of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, who's pleasing to Krishna, the most pleasing to Krishna, as we'll explore in just a few minutes from the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Those who don't know Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī must look to the Bhagavatam to understand that Krishna, after Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī left the rasa dance, Krishna felt, although there were billions of other perfectly qualified gopis there, he thought, well, I can't get the same happiness from this. So that's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Who is that person? Shukadeva Goswami would not overtly discuss Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī in his teachings to Parikshit Maharaj. Our Shastras say, the Acharyas mentioned that he was careful not to take any time out from his teachings, because he knew that by discussing Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī directly, that he himself may be affected. As we know from the Srimad Bhagavatam also, Evam vratasva priyanama kirtya jatanurago jitachuta ucher hasatyato rotiti roti kayati unmadavam rititi lokabhayaha. Those whose hearts have melted in the process of devotional service then become sometimes uncontrolled, and they faint in ecstasy. And Shukadeva Goswami didn't want to faint in ecstasy, so he mentions in context that there is one special gopi amongst all of them who Krishna cannot get the pleasure that he's looking for if she's not there. So that's the context in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which we'll see in a few minutes. And now we're going to begin by singing a song about Vrindavan and the spiritual world. And these songs, and this song, written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, these songs in general take us directly to the spiritual world, like looking through a window. So we can enter into that mood of Vrindavan by singing Krishna's names in relationship with his dearest devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Okay, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and today's verse is at Canto 10, Chapter 9, and it's text number 21. Nayam Sukhapo Bhagavan Dehinam Gopikasuta Yaninam Chatma Bhutanam Yatha Bhaktimatam Yiha Na Not Ayam This Sukha Apaha Very easily obtainable, or an object of happiness. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dehinam, of persons in the bodily concept of life, especially the karmis. Gopikasuta, Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda. Krishna, as the son of Vasudeva, is called Vasudeva, and as the son of Mother Yashoda, he is known as Krishna.
Krishna, as the son of Vasudeva, is called Vasudeva, and as the son of Mother Yashoda, he is known as Krishna.
Jnaninam cha, end of the jnanis, who try to be free from material contamination. Atma bhutanam, of self-sufficient yogis. Yatha, as bhakti matam, of the devotees. Iha, in this world. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, is accessible to devotees engaged in spontaneous loving service, but he is not as easily accessible to mental speculators, to those striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances, or to those who consider the body the same as the self. Purport: Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the son of Mother Yashoda, is very easily available to devotees, but not to tapasvis, yogis, jnanis, and others who have a bodily concept of life. Although they may sometimes be called Shanta Bhaktas, real bhakti begins with Dasya Ras. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 4:11, Ye yata mam prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manusha partha sarvasha. As living entities surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Everyone is seeking Krishna, for he is the supersoul of all individual souls. Everyone loves his body and wants to protect it because he is within the body as the soul. And everyone loves the soul because the soul is part and parcel of the supersoul. Therefore, everyone is actually seeking to achieve happiness by reviving his relationship with the supersoul. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Vedaishcha sarver ahameva vedya. By all the Vedas, it is I who am to be known. Therefore, the karmis, jnanis, yogis, and saintly persons are all seeking Krishna. But by following in the footsteps of devotees who are in a direct relationship with Krishna, especially the inhabitants of Vrindavan, one could reach the supreme position of associating with Krishna. As it is said, Vrindavana purityaja padamekam nakachchati. Krishna does not leave Vrindavan even for a moment. The Vrindavan Vasis, Mother Yashoda, Krishna's friends, and Krishna's conjugal lovers, the younger gopis with whom he dances, have very intimate relationships with Krishna. And if one follows in the footsteps of these devotees, Krishna is available. Although the Nitya Siddha expansions of Krishna always remain with Krishna, if those engaged in sadhana siddhi follow in the footsteps of Krishna's Nitya Siddha associates, such sadhana siddhas also can easily attain Krishna without difficulty. But there are those who are attached to bodily concepts of life. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, for example, have very prestigious positions, and thus they have the sense of being very exalted Ishwaras. In other words, because Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are guna avatars and have exalted positions, they have some small sense of being like Krishna. But the pure devotees who inhabit Vrindavan do not possess any bodily conception. They are fully dedicated to the service of the Lord in sublime affection, prema. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore recommended prema pumarto mahan. The highest perfection of life is prema, pure love in relationship with Krishna. And Mother Yashoda appears to be the topmost of devotees who have attained this perfection. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who brought to the whole world this conception of pure love between Radha and Krishna. It was otherwise unavailable anywhere in the world, but now it's becoming more and more prominent. I offer my respectful obeisances to all the acharyas in the disciplic succession and to all of you, because you're Vaishnavas and therefore are the most worshipable. Vanchakalpatarvascha kripasnabhe vachapatitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. So before we say a few more words, how many minutes more do we have? Just so I know. 1 more hour only. Okay. So just to frame the way we think about Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī and the discussion we'll have today, I'm going to read a 3-paragraph piece by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is especially keen on helping those who would aspire for devotional service to understand the nature of the Leela in the spiritual world, especially the pastimes between Radha and Krishna, which people from a bodily conception of life will consider to be like an ordinary types of interactions between boys and girls in the material world, which is not the ideal of those who are engaged in devotional service. In fact, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had uttered Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajano Mukasya Param Param Jigamasur Bhavasagarasya. That this idea of interaction between male and female within the material world, or actually what he was saying was it's a kind of illusory situation, as we know from Bhagavatam, Pumsa Striya Maitini Bhavamitam, and the interaction between male and female in the material world is the binding force. So he said, for those, especially in the renounced order of life, who are endeavoring to make spiritual advancement, to look lustfully and think that I can enjoy this relationship physically, mentally. There's a way in which he said it's very dangerous. In fact, he said it even stronger than that. And here's what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says: to be able to observe the lofty position of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī and her confidential associates is not within the realm of the common people, especially only those who engage constantly in intimate, confidential, and eternal loving service to her understand this sacred truth. Conversely, no one, for that matter, can fathom the mysteries and esoteric implications of such pastimes except her confidential associates. The day when our link with this material world is limited to the barest necessities, and furthermore, when our trivial opinions, concocted austerities, pious works, so-called knowledge, and mystic power are considered worthless like straw, when our worship of Narayan in his mood of majesty is not relishable in the least, at that time, when we are not inclined at all to be outspoken in the confidential topics of divine pastimes like the rasa dance, only then will we be fit candidates to receive such confidential information. The service to their lordship Sri Sri Radha Govinda is not expressible in common language. The use of the words swakiya, parikiya usually become intermingled with our own intense residual desires for sense gratification. It is for this reason, due to lack of qualified people, that the divine pastimes of Sri Radha Krishna cannot be discussed, heard, and understood by the common people of this world, and in saying there are very few qualified people is not an exaggeration. So that was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mood. He kept the conception of these pastimes high above his head, our heads, as worshipable. We're looking up to them. So Srila Prabhupada, in his expertise, couched all of his expressions and descriptions and translations of the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto in Sambandha Jnana, which means that, well, when he came out with the Krishna book, which he did preemptively because he thought maybe he would leave his body sooner than he did, and that he wouldn't get a chance to get to the 10th canto, which he only got to the first, actually he only was able to complete the first 13 cantos. And 13 chapters, sorry. And so he wrote the Krishna book in summary. It's a summary of the 10th canto because it's so important. As I think we heard the other day, or at least I think we talked about this verse in Toronto, Vikriditam vrajavadur biraham cha Vishnu shadhanvito nashunu yad atavarna yedya bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhyakamam hridrogam ashvapahinot yacharin adhira. Just the last chapter in the chapter of the Rasa Lila, in which Shukadeva Goswami says, if you hear these pastimes, which are vikriditam, V means they're not ordinary, kriditam means activities, and vikriditam means they're very different from ordinary activities. Shadhan vito nashunu yad. If you hear of them with faith, which means that you have to have proper context to understand that they're not ordinary. Then he said you can overcome the dread disease of the heart, which is lust. Of course, desire is always there within the soul. That's the nature of the living force, is to desire. And of course, we know that, as Prabhupada explained, and as we hear from the Shastra, that this is inherent within it's in this nature of the soul to love. So then where we express that is vitally important, because when it's directed towards our interactions in our illusory relationships in the material world, which means that I'm not my body and others are not their bodies, and the idea of some satisfaction between one material body and another is kind of like the idea of two big tractors on a field, getting together and thinking, oh, this is something special. But actually, the real happiness is in the loving pastimes between Radha and Krishna, which are not material, and our appreciation of them. This verse says, pulls us out from the mundane condition of the material world. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is the literature which in detail describes the ways in which Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, who is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I said earlier, as a preamble, indirectly. And therefore, we have this verse from 10:30:28. Anayaradito nunam Bhagavan Harir Ishvara Yanno Vihaya Govinda Prito Yam Anayadraha. And this is Shukadeva Goswami describing the rasa dance. And he says, certainly this particular gopi has perfectly worshipped the all-powerful personality of Godhead, Govinda, since he was so pleased with her that he abandoned the rest of us and brought her to a secluded place. Is everyone okay so far? Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that the word āradita refers to Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. He comments, the sage Shukadeva Goswami has tried with all endeavor to keep her name hidden, but now it automatically shines forth from the moon of his mouth. That he has spoken her name is indeed her mercy, and thus the word āradita is like the rumbling of a kettle drum sounded to announce her great good fortune. Although the gopis spoke as if jealous of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, they were actually ecstatic to see that she had captured Sri Krishna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes the following detailed description of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī's footprints, as given by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Sri Ujjvala Nilamani. At the base of the large toe of her left foot is the mark of a barley corn. Below that mark is a disc. Below the disc is an umbrella, and below the umbrella is a bracelet. A vertical line extends from the middle of her foot to the juncture of her large and second toes. At the base of the middle toe is a lotus. Below that is a flag with a banner, and below the flag is a creeper, together with a flower. At the base of her small toe is an elephant goad, and upon her heel is a half moon. Thus there are 11 marks on her left foot. Anyone? Without looking? We need Vaikuntha Nayaka here. At the base of the large toe of her right foot is a conch shell, and below that is a spear. At the base of the small toe of her right foot is a sacrificial altar, below that an earring, and below the earring a spear. Along the base of the second, third, fourth, and small toes is the mark of a mountain. Below that is a chariot, and on the heel is a fish. Thus altogether there are 19 distinguishing marks on the soles of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī's lotus feet. So here is an important verse for our Gaudiya Sampradaya, because the pinnacle of our worship is Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And this verse points out that she is the best devotee. So what does that mean, that she's the best? And what does this phrase or the word that's within the verse mean? Anayaradito. So anaya, by her, aradita, perfectly worshipped. Aradita. So that forms the basis of the word Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Aradita. The one who perfectly worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And herein lies the secret of devotional service, and that is that Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī is the best of all servitors. So, first of all, the idea of service. Everybody likes it. Everybody, except for one class. That's the conditioned souls. They don't like it. The Balaram, as we know from Balaram Jayanti, he's manifesting himself in every possible way he can, everything he can think of, and then as shesha, as the remainder. Is anything left over? Any other thing I can do to do service? Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī is fully dedicated to Krishna's service, so much so that that service mood, she expands throughout the spiritual world as Vrindavan. The Hladini Shakti is expanded there in such a way that Krishna can enjoy in the most perfect way. As we know from the Śrī Brahma-saṁhitā, what verse am I thinking? Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavitavis tabirya eva nijarupa tayakalavi goloka eva nivasat yakilatma puto govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. This verse in the Śrī Brahma-saṁhitā describes Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. It says Krishna is there but eternally expanded. To serve him is Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And within the purport, have you ever read the purport to that verse? We've read it together in the old days. But it's the longest purport you'll find in the Brahma-saṁhitā or perhaps anywhere else. And it's a description really of the 64 arts that Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī is perfect in. And she offers that to Krishna. It's this perfection of service that is ārādhanam, this feeling of let me perfect my service. So this is the motto of ISV. Our motto, our battle cry is always better service. And this is the mood of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And all the devotees are always trying to follow in her footsteps to perform better and better service to Krishna. Because her service is the best. Her service is perfect. So we try to perfect our service. In Vrindavan once, Prabhupada came out of his room and the devotees offered him a garland. It was scraggly. Is that a word? Scraggly? It is? Yay. It was scraggly, it was withered. And in the first place, it wasn't a very nice garland. But after the heat hit it, then it turned into something that made Prabhupada's lips curl a little bit. And then he called all the garland makers to his room, and he gave them a seminar on how to make garlands. So when I walked in this morning and I saw these, the garlands that the devotees are making here, this is ārādhanam. This is the mood of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī in the fine arts in the spiritual world. As an example, garland making is one of the arts. And can it be refined? Well, I remember a day here at ISV when it was by Jamuna's grace that we had any flowers at all. We were so poor. How poor were we? How poor were you? I remember we were so poor when we decided to start our Sankirtan party and we needed a table. We looked around at each other. It's like, well, where are we going to get it? Need a table to set up. We'll have to get somebody to loan us the money. And the flowers that we were getting, because Jamuna from the very beginning was the only one supplying us flowers, and they were carnations, but the room was so hot there at our old temple. How hot was it? It was so hot that those little garlands that we offered with the best of what we could put together, they would dry up within an hour, and they became these very scraggly little garlands. But over time, we see that the devotees have learned the art of making garlands, and Krishna has given more and more facility to get flowers, which is the real opulence in deity worship, flowers. And now, if you see these vases up here next to Prabhupada or over here, this looks like somebody's following in the footsteps of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. What to speak of Prabhupada's garland? Hare Krishna. And you can imagine while they're making those garlands, they take hours. It takes hours to make those. And then the offering goes, and Srila Prabhupada wears it for a few hours. The deities wear them for a few hours. But do the devotees who made them feel satisfied? Yeah, completely satisfied, because they put their heart and soul into glorifying Krishna through the flowers. So in the chapter, in the purport of Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitavis Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Taya Kalabi, it is described how Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī is perfect in these 64 arts. And they're all ways of playing music and doing making aesthetic presentations to please Krishna. And she's the best. So, how can we benefit as souls in this world? As I said, everybody's looking for service. Balaram and of course Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And everybody in the spiritual world, Advaita Acharya, he wants to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He doesn't want any kind of respect from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so he devises a way to prove that Mahaprabhu is superior. This is what devotees want. What do souls conditioned by the material world want? No, I want everyone to serve me. They're the only ones that get left out. And that's a sad choice to make. It makes the soul hard-hearted and sad all the time, because no one can serve us hard enough. No matter how much service you get, you still like, that's it? That's all you can do? Steve Jobs tried to make the best iPhone in the world, and people after a while, they go, that's all you can do? Yeah. And of course, Prabhupada used to give the example of Gandhi. And he said, no politician has ever served his or her country more than Gandhi. And at the end, he got exactly the opposite of what he wanted. He didn't want partition. He wanted everyone to live together in harmony. And that's the opposite of what happened. And then the people who were dedicated to him throughout his life decided that they were going to get into politics, and they shunned him. And finally, one of his own people killed him. So that's what you get in the material world for your service. So the spiritual service that we're seeking is exemplified by Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And therefore this verse that we read today in the beginning, Arajo Bhagavan Vrajesha Taniyas Tadama Vrindavana. No, I'm sorry, I'm quoting a different verse. Nayam Sukapo Bhagavan Dehinam Gopikasita Dehinam Chatmabhutanam Yata Bhaktimatam Iha. So this verse is famous. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used it here, there, and everywhere. One of the places he used it, and the verse, again, describes how you can't come to Krishna except by this perfected service. And perfected means that you have no desire for any return. It's selfless service. As we hear at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, you're entering into a different world here. Dharma prochita kaitavo traparamo nirmatsaranam satam. That this is not for kaitava, it's not for cheating. In the material world, even the philanthropists are doing some kind of cheating. Because, first of all, they don't exactly know how to do good for others. Generally, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, philanthropists, they'll open a hospital or they're due to start feeding people, but then, they'll kill little rabbits or, some innocent animal and say, here, why don't you eat this to stave off your hunger, and so forth. So he mentions in this verse that, Shukadev, that people in the material world, they try through karma, or they try through gyan, which means to renounce the world, and through yoga, where there's some self-interest of getting some perfection. But all of these fall short. However, if one engages in this unmotivated, uninterrupted, pure devotional service, as exemplified by Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, then one can easily please Krishna. Nayam sukhapo bhagavan dehinam gopikasata dehinam chatmabhutanam yata bhaktimatam iha gyaninam chatmabhutanam. So yata bhaktimatam iha, nothing can satisfy Krishna like this. So where does this come up? It comes up in the Chaitanya Charitamrita when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was visiting South India, and he went to the home of Vyankatabhata. And Vyankatabhata was worshipping Lakshmi Narayan. So Mahaprabhu, in a half-joking spirit, many a truth was told in jest, was discussing with Vyankanta and said, so why are you worshipping Narayan, Lakshmi Narayan? So why not, sir? He said, because actually, as we can see from the history, that Śrīmati Lakshmi Devi wanted to enter into the rasa dance because she saw that actually Krishna is the most attractive. And even Krishna realizes that. We know in Dwarka, when Krishna sees a picture of himself as Gopal, then he's like, oh, yeah, that's more attractive. Everyone sees that. And so Lakshmi Devi saw that also, and she performed austerities to try to enter the rasa dance, but she couldn't give up her mood of being an Ishvari, a controller. And therefore, she couldn't enter the rasa dance. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what about that? To Vyankata. And Vyankata was it's like, yeah, well, what does that mean? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then quoted this verse, Nayam Sukapo Bhagavan Dehinam Gopikasta Jnaninam Chatma Bhutani Yata Bhaktimatam Iha. That nobody can approach Krishna except those who have unalloyed devotion. And that unalloyed devotion, as in the context of the story, was, and as we heard from the Srimad Bhagavatam today, is represented by, is presented by Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Therefore, in our sampradaya, our mood is to be the servant of the servant of the servant of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. And Gopi Bharatu Parakamalayo Das 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 Anadasaha. How's that verse start? Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir Napi Vaisho Nashudro. Naham Varni Nacha Gripatir Napi Vaisho Nashudraha. I'll start over. It's funny when you say a verse almost every day and then you can't remember. Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir Napi Vaisho Nashudro. Naham Varni Nacha Gripatir Navanasto Yatirva. Kintu Prodyan Nikila Paramananda Purnamritabdir Gopi Bhartu Kamalayo Das Das Anudasaha. So this verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appreciated and even said it at Ratha Yatra. And it says, he says, that I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a Kshatriya, not a Brahmin, not a Grihastha, not a Brahmachari, not a Sannyasi, not a Vanaprastha. I'm not any of these designations, but what am I? I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of the maintainer of the gopis. So this is the mood through which one can approach Krishna properly. And this is actually a verse that one is recommended, one must say before one starts doing archana. Before you sit down to worship Krishna in the form of his deity, you say this verse to be in the proper consciousness. This is the yoga part of doing deity worship, is to properly situate yourself in your constitutional position. So Śrī Radhāśṭamī is remembering this most important of all the aspects of our Sampradaya's teaching, and that is the mood of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī in service and also in separation, which we'll say more about in just a few minutes. But right now we're going to take reflections and questions to expand the conversation. Go right ahead. Is everyone okay? All right. Reflect. Devavrata, Prabhu.
I have a question.
Okay.
There's this verse that Srila Prabhupada quotes in the purport of the verse we read today. Vrindavanam parikyaja padam ekam nagachati. Krishna does not leave Vrindavan even for a moment. I was wondering if you could speak about that, because in the pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna does leave Vrindavan. So could we understand the tattva behind that?
Yes, that's explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and Prabhupada elaborates on it in the Krishna book, or he summarizes it. But it's that, of course, Krishna is everywhere. Ekopyaso rachaditam jagaranda kotim yat shakti rasti jagaranda chayayadanta Andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. I got one right. You count that. So actually, Krishna points this out to the gopis because when he sends Uddhava, after Krishna leaves Vrindavan, then the gopis are left disconsolate, and they're just waiting for him to come back. All the devotees are there, except for actually there's a description of how the cowherd boys, because they have this sense of spurti, that they're actually seeing Krishna. And because of the intensity of their separation, they're seeing Krishna all the time, so they don't really feel separation from him like the gopis. That's one of the reasons that they didn't go to Kurukshetra along with everybody else, because they were like, well, Krishna's already here. Why would we go to Kurukshetra? And when Krishna left Vrindavan and went to Mathura, and the gopis were suffering in separation, then Krishna sent a letter with Uddhava. Actually, as we know from the commentaries, Krishna sent Uddhava because Uddhava his guru was Brihaspati, and it doesn't get much better than that. He knew everything about everything, and he's like the perfect disciple of Brihaspati. He's one of the Harivasaras, one of the greatest devotees of Hari is Uddhava, amongst Yudhishthir and Giri Govardhan. And so Krishna sent him there to blow his mind. That, yes, you're my confidential devotee. You actually guide me and tell me, do this, don't do that. No, walk out now, don't walk out later. And he said, but when Uddhava went to Vrindavan and saw the state of the gopis in their intense separation from Krishna, then he humbled himself, or he was humble, but he submitted himself that if I could take birth here as a clump of grass, somewhere near the footpaths where the gopis walk, and some of the dust from their feet would come up and land on my head, then maybe I could have a chance at being, having something significant in my life, because he realized the greatness of their love. So in the letter that Krishna sent, which was kind of interesting, he told the gopis that, I'm everywhere. You should practice meditation. Krishna's really funny, actually. He's humorous. But he sent this letter. People take it different ways, but the acharyas point out that this is kind of ludicrous because the gopis are trying to forget Krishna. They're suffering so much in separation. It's like, what are you talking about? Meditate on him. We can't forget him. We're trying to forget him. And so the point, first of all, is valid that Krishna is everywhere. It's not that he ever leaves Vrindavan. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, actually, he's there in his bhava expansion. And so there's the prakat and aprakat regions that manifest, Krishna's manifest pastimes and his unmanifest pastimes. Those that are manifest, we can see before our eyes, and they're recorded in the Srimad Bhagavatam and so forth. And the aprakat is going on between Krishna and his devotees, that is unmanifest, that we can't see. And those are intimate connections with his devotees through their devotional service, and therefore he's present, as Prabhupada says, in his bhava expansion there in Vrindavan. He never really leaves. He never really appears either, because he's already here. When we celebrate Janmashtami, we say, oh, Krishna has made an avatar, but actually he's here all the time. And he just manifests in a particular way, because he's always present. Yes. Oh, right. Who's up in the top left hand? I can't see. Prahlad? Okay, Prahlad, please go
Krishna,
ahead,
Prabhu.
and then we'll come to Pavani Bhakti.
So, Prabhu, I have this question. So, when one is talking to their friends or anyone, right? So, one ends up bragging about themselves unintentionally. So, would offering service to devotees help someone get rid of it? And what kind of service would help it?
Yes, and sweeping the floor or washing pots.
Would that be the fastest way?
Yes.
And why is it unintentional and embarrassing later?
Unintentional to glorify oneself.
Yeah.
It's our natural proclivity when we're in the material world. We have a material body, and we mature to a certain point. Babies, you can see it really clearly. They're the center of attention. Just watch mother and baby. Mother, even for a second, looks somewhere else, starts having a side conversation. Babe, wait a minute. Or he gets on the phone. The baby will crawl on the mother, grab the phone or the microphone. Children we've seen already here. Mother wants to make a point, and then the child will come from wherever she was and runs up and grabs the mic. No. Only me. And then, if we don't actually make spiritual progress, then we could even give a kirtan and look at me. So we have to notice the ways in which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described the perfection of devotional service. He says, practice this. Tarnadapi sunichena, tororapi suishna. Be very humble. Don't consider yourself the center. And also, don't expect respect from others. Whereas you give it, don't respect it from others. So you can practice that. And one way I've practiced it is just noticing. I told Nirkul about it, so this is verified. I didn't just make it up in the moment. You can verify if you wish. But I'm thinking about okay, when you enter into conversation with somebody, be very conscious. Don't bring up anything about yourself. Don't say oh yeah, I did that before. They said, yeah, we just did that. It's yeah, we do that already. We thought of this thing. It's yeah, we thought of that 3 years ago. We had a Janmashtami. We had 10,000 people. We had 12,000. So this is right? Did I say these things? So if you practice this, just try it and see how your false ego feels. You enter into a conversation. Don't say anything about yourself unless they ask you. And then be very sparing and see if they ask you for more. And then you can also judge the nature of your relationship there, of who you're talking to. But it's revealing. And so Mahaprabhu said, Trinadapi sunichena, practice this. Practice not being the center and see how it feels. And actually, it feels fine. It feels much better, actually, than always trying to assert. It's but it's the leftover nature of, I'm the child. I have to be the center. I have to be noticed. I have to get everything. How come you got one spoonful more than I did? Just be yourself and if you think about how I can be a servant, then you'll be satisfied. So your remedy, I liked your remedy. Find some menial service where practically nobody notices you. It's not the front position, and just do it and see if you feel satisfied or not, and you will. And these simple ways of doing menial service and avoiding putting oneself in the center all the time, unless it's your duty to do so, and then it's also, interestingly, another kind of humility. Arjuna had to step up and be the hero. He said, that's all right, I'll just walk away. And Krishna said, no, you have to be in the center right now. Thank you for those questions, Prabhu. Really nice. Okay, Pavani Bhakti.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Happy Radhashtami.
Thank you.
I really liked the point when you were saying that Radharani expands herself to serve Krishna, and then you added the point where you said Balaram expands himself and becomes the paraphernalia to serve Krishna everywhere. And then whatever is left, he expands as Shesha and then glorifies Krishna that way. I was just wondering, how do we learn this for our life, and what we should do, knowing that example of Balaram, and how should we?
To look at our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. His motto was, everything for Krishna, nothing for me. And just examine his life and watch how he moved in the world. He's bringing all this to us, this whole process, so that we can come into the real state of happiness in our life. And he showed by his example in his life. So you can see his mood on the Jaladuta, how he's coming and he's just praying to Krishna, let me do the service that my spiritual master gave. And this is a point that he makes again and again. Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana. That if you focus on the order of your spiritual master, which comes in disciplic succession, you're getting divine service. Mahat sevam dwara vuhur muktes tamo dwaram yoshitam sangi sangam. You're able to overcome the material world by serving the Mahat. And so if you see Prabhupada's mood, and then you find it in the devotees, and we emulate that mood, and we become the servant of the servant, then we'll live that life. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ananyas chintayantamam yejana paryupasate, tesham nityabdiyuktanam yoga kshemam mahamyaham. If your consciousness is absorbed like this, that all I want is service, then Krishna says, I'll take care of everything else. In fact, it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam how Krishna is always trying to serve his devotees. In fact, it says he's trying to take the dust from their feet, from the feet of his devotees. And so devotees never want to take service from Krishna. Therefore, if we serve the devotees, then we please Krishna the most. That's why he says, Mad Bhakta Puja Bhyadika, 11th canto, that if service to my devotees is the best. So be the servant of the servant of the servant. And also, we read this morning, we were studying the verse from the Śrī Upadeshamrita. It says, Nama Rupa Charitari Sikirtananu Smrityo Kramena Rasana Manasi Niyoja. In this verse, the word Kramena means that if you start doing the preliminary activities of devotional service, then gradually your mind will become absorbed in devotional service, and everything else will manifest in your life from following the simple path that you're following now. And then Akurnath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is it Deva Vrata?
Yes.
Yeah. In further to his question, I just wanted to recommend one book by Shivaram Swami called Krishna Sangati, or Meetings with Krishna in Vrindavan. And it discusses this whole point about how Krishna never takes a step out of Vrindavan, with references to explanations of many different writings of the 6 Goswamis. And it will blow your mind.
Would you like to mention a few references?
Well, you mean actually tell some of the stories that are explained there, or he talks about.
Yeah, give us a little sample, a little something to wet our beaks.
Well, he does discuss Uddhava coming and speaking, but he says that he describes in detail. In fact, there's an introduction for about 80 pages long that he describes in detail the meaning of the aprakata and the prakata lila, and he talks about how when Krishna killed Dantavakra, he was near Vrindavan. He actually mentions that even though we think that Krishna went with Akrura on the chariot and he didn't come back to Vrindavan, but he was actually coming back a lot. And one verse when he's entering into Dwarka, the residents of Dwarka say that when you visit Mathura and other places like that, we're missing you. And he's explaining that Krishna is actually going back. And he tells the story about how Krishna actually comes back later and marries the gopis, which is the Jiva Goswami description. That later, we all know how Krishna stole the garments and the girls got Krishna as their husband. And he actually came back and married them. He explains how their other husbands are, just manifestations. Anyway, it's a little bit beyond my ability to explain it all. But he tells all these various different stories, even how the gopis then expanded themselves into the queens in Dwarka. Then later the gopis from Vrindavan actually visited Dwarka, and that's where we get the gopi chandan, the gold color that they absorbed themselves into a lake there and became and their golden hue, but how they astonish the queens of Dwarka with their mood of service. And it's been a long time since I've read it. There's just a lot of stuff in it, but it's, if you can get a copy of it, I don't know if it's still in print, but it's very, very, I think it's a very important book.
Thank you very much. We'll put that as a TBC, to be continued, a conversation to be continued. It's an ongoing conversation. And to satisfy the heart of Devavrata Prabhu, we'll discuss it more in subsequent classes. Okay? One, two.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
In the 9th chapter, Krishna says of Bhagavad Gita that I am Mata Dhata Pitamaha. I am the father and the mother. So my question I wanted to ask, and I have been wondering about it, is when we think about Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī and in the mood that we want to pray to her, can we think of her as a mother? Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Just as Krishna, Pitamaha, is described, or Pita, he's Krishna Mata, Krishna Pita, Krishna Dhanapran, Krishna your mother, Krishna your father. And as Sita is described as the universal mother, similarly Radharani is considered like that too, because she's the nurturer, takes care of all the devotees. We're under the protection of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, just like a child is under the protection of a mother. So yeah. And just in that vein, Prabhupada describes how if you consider your mother and how she took care of you, or is still taking care of you, and notice that it's the epitome of selfless service in this world. Isn't it? Did your mother take care of you? And still taking care of you? Mother gives this selfless service to the child. So then Prabhupada said, okay, imagine your mother, but then times it times 1,000,000 or 10 million. And then you start to get the idea of the compassion of Kṛṣṇa, or as you mentioned, Radharani, towards the living being. And actually our mother in this world is a representative of Kṛṣṇa. It's just like a mask somebody's wearing, saying, "I'll play the part of your mother. I'll be your mother this time." Just like if you go to a restaurant, they say, "I'll be your servitor." Or what do they call it? Your waiter. "I'll be your waiter tonight." So same thing, you come into the hospital out of the womb and it's like, "I'll be your mom this time." And then you get this, exchange. But consider where it comes from. The source of that is Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I had a question about when it's considered okay to discuss the conjugal pastimes of Radha Krishna. So it appears that in the Vikriditam Vrajavadhu verse, Shukdev Goswami, it appears he's encouraging devotees to hear and glorify these pastimes. But yet Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas, they have also warned us. So is it that Shukdev Goswami is encouraging us to discuss these pastimes in private settings where all devotees can appreciate them, but Vaishnava Acharyas are warning us against discussing these pastimes in public?
The key word in the verse, Shraddhanvito Nashrunuyad. So Shrunuyad means to hear, and Shraddhanvito means you should hear with faith. Now, what does that mean exactly? It means that you have to have the proper context given to you by a bona fide spiritual master. In this case, we get the Krishna book. I was about to tell a story, and then I interrupted myself earlier, and that is that some of Prabhupada's godbrothers were saying, well, how is it that you're producing the Krishna book, and it's the 10th canto, and you're mass distributing it? Given, this point that you're bringing up. Now, of course, the answer is that Prabhupada couches all of the Rasa Lila and any other point that might be misunderstood by somebody who doesn't have the realization, Shraddhanvito, or the faith, in Sambandha Gyan. You can't go practically a few inches in Prabhupada's Krishna book without running into it. And, by the way, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Naham Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya Samarita, like fools and rascals think he's an ordinary person. So constantly we're being reminded. So some of Prabhupada's godbrothers said, why are you distributing this first? Because Krishna book was one of the first books. In fact, as I wrote in my book, Our Family Business, available from the Bhaktivedanta Bush Trust at $15.95. I make no profit. Actually the Krishna book saved the Hare Krishna movement. We were so poor. The Hare Krishna movement, I mean, there were a bunch of, young people running around selling magazines for 25 cents a piece. How are you going to get any money doing that? Even back in the 1960s and early 70s. And then the Krishna book came out, and Buddhimanta, Mahatma Prabhu, they figured out, hey, we can actually sell these for $10, $20. And then all of a sudden, the coffers started to fill up everywhere because of the Krishna book. Krishna book saved the world, actually. 10th canto. Yeah. Bravo. Just as the Srimad Bhagavatam will save the world too. This is a Save Earth campaign. The only thing you can do it is the Srimad Bhagavatam. Save Earth now. Get Srimad Bhagavatam. Give Srimad Bhagavatam. Don't hold back. So some of his godbrothers said, what's the deal? And Prabhupada said, just like in Gujarat. Any Gujaratis in here? Let's hear it for the Gujaratis. Yay! It's said, I haven't actually proved it yet by sitting with enough Gujaratis, but they take their sweets first. Sweets come first. So Prabhupada said, sweets come first. It's a Gujarati thing. But the fact is that we have to do it carefully. Shraddhanvito nishrunuyad. We have to hear with caution and not try to compartmentalize that hearing. This is one of the points Prabhupada made in Los Angeles when the Krishna book, or the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out. Some of the devotees said, aha, here's all the nectar pastimes of Radha Krishna. We're just going to read these. Forget the Bhagavad Gita. And they formed a club, and Prabhupada heard about it, and he told them, no, that's not how you do it. You can hear these things, but it's called incidental hearing. It means that you read all the way through. You read the Adi Lila first, then the Madhya Lila, but of course start with Bhagavad Gita and Sri Upanishad. Work your way up. And it's similar. I thought of this once when walking around Govardhan Hill, or more than once, practically every time I've walked around. And that is, some places are very smooth and some places are a little rough. You see gravel ahead and it's like, there's no getting around it. You're walking over that and you just keep going. So as we hear the Shastra, there may be various philosophical points, and you can't just say, no, I just want to hear the intimate pastimes. We're not selective like that. We have to go on hearing everything. And when there is, under proper guidance and through proper hearing extensively, an actual diminishment of the lower modes of material nature, will internally become more attracted to hearing and chanting in general. And then it can become more refined from there. But trying to do it prematurely and trying to just imitate is not effective. And it's also condemned because we don't have access to it. It's ludicrous, actually. In fact, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj said, young woman goes to a hospital and there's a maternity ward there, and so she hears a woman in giving birth to a child, and she's groaning in pain. So then this young woman who's thinking that she wants to have a child, she goes home and then she'll sit there and she'll groan with the same way, thinking, I'll get a child. But actually, that's not the way to get a child. Shraddhanvito means you have to hear and serve and actually develop internally the real thing. Adau shraddha tata sarasangata bhajana kriya tato narta nivritti syat tato nishta ruchis tata. So there's a way that it develops naturally, just the way a child develops in the womb and then comes out. Okay, we'll take a couple more. Yes, Prabhu. Welcome to ISV, Hari Murli. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. So my question was that it was clear from today's class that the mood we should have is to be the servant of the servant of the servant. But my question or my confusion is that if we do service separated by so many degrees from Krishna, then how do we at the same time develop a personal relationship with him?
It probably gives the answer in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. May I have a Bhagavad Gita? If you ask for a Bhagavad Gita in a Hare Krishna temple, you should get one in 5 seconds or less. Thank you very much. So Prabhupada mentions here at the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that this is the great mystery of the disciplic succession, that all that seems to be indirect, it's quite direct. And the example he gives, which I'm trying to stall, you can tell, is in relationship to Sanjaya, who's speaking to Dhritarashtra. And he says here, this is number 75 in the 18th chapter, Vyasa was the spiritual master of Sanjaya, and Sanjaya admits that it was by Vyasa's mercy that he could understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means that one has to understand Krishna not directly, but through the medium of the spiritual master. The spiritual master is the transparent medium, although it is true that the experience is still direct. This is the mystery of the disciplic succession. When the spiritual master is bona fide, then one can hear Bhagavad Gita directly, as Arjuna heard it. There are many mystics and yogis all over the world, but Krishna is the master of all yoga systems. Krishna's instruction is explicitly stated in Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto Krishna. One who does so is the topmost yogi. This is confirmed in the last verse of the 6th chapter, Yogi Namapi Sarvesham. Another helpful analogy is when you go to one of those big telescopes, like sometimes some organization, government or otherwise, will put up on a hill so you can look at the heavens, and they're enormous, right? And they have a big end and a small end. So if you climb up the ladder there and it's your turn to look through and you say, no, I don't want to look in that small end. Give me the big end. I want to see the whole thing. It's like, no, you'll see the whole thing, but look at that's customized for your eye. So there's this really amazing and charming way in which Krishna makes himself available to us locally through what appears to be a channel that's amenable to our sense of like, yeah, here's a person we can relate to. And then through that service, we'll start to notice for ourselves that it's direct, because it's like electricity. It comes through a copper wire, and wherever you touch it, when the wire's connected, then you're going to feel the current that's coming through. And that's the mystery as it's being described here. Although it seems indirect, it's direct. I mean, what are you going to do if Krishna appears anyway? I mean, what are you going to say? You know, Krishna comes and says, like, you ready to go back to, let's go. And you're like, yeah, I got an appointment at 3 o'clock tonight. You know, there's a little adjustment to actually serving in the spiritual world full time. In fact, there's a way in which Prabhupada describes, and is well known, that when you are engaged in devotional service and you almost reach perfection, you leave your body, you go to a universe in the material world where Krishna is performing his pastimes. And there you continue to perfect yourself in the service. It's an ongoing, ever-expanding process. However, what my point was that, you know, we're always under the care of a devotee. When Raghunath Das Goswami surrendered, actually he tried to get away from his family, but he couldn't until he went and surrendered to Lord Nityananda, who's the origin of all spiritual masters. That was indicative of the process. Then he went to Mahaprabhu directly, because he got that mercy to go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he went to surrender to Mahaprabhu, and then Mahaprabhu said, you're with him, Sarup Damodar. You're under him. In fact, you're the Raghunath of Sarup. That's your thing. And then he came back later. Can you give me a direct instruction? To Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu said, well, he knows more than I do, because in in the spiritual world, he's Lalita, so he has privy to things that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he can explain it in ways that Mahaprabhu wasn't going to explain it in. So there's this sense there, even in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's presence, that he put him under somebody who would train him properly. He did give him direct instruction. He said, don't eat opulent food and don't wear nice clothes, which Raghunath Das Goswami followed quite strictly. Okay, we have time for two more. 1, 2. Mayapur Vihari Prabhu and then Pavani Bhakti.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, the gopis headed by Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī has been considered the topmost devotees by everyone, like Narad Muni, Uddhavji, and even Lord Krishna himself says, I cannot repay your debts to all the gopis. For our own learning, for my own learning, what is the mood? Apparently, the gopis had to have this viraha bhav for practically the entire life. They always were in the mood of missing Krishna, but still they were there. Apparently, in my life, if something goes amiss, even in my devotional service, I should not, be morose. Or that, of course, that mode of gopis is the topmost, the highest. But if you can elaborate more on the learnings of their bhava, that apparently Krishna was not with them for more than 100 years, but still Krishna himself came to the conclusion, I cannot repay you. If you can elaborate more, how we can imbibe that learning in our life, when things are apparently not good, even on the devotional side or otherwise.
Well, I think that by absorbing ourselves in what we have, the devotees who are engaged in practical service actually realize this to some degree, because we naturally feel that we're connected to the spiritual energy by being fully engaged in Krishna's service. There are so many services that we can take up, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and then we see in ISKCON we have the spectrum of all 64 activities of limbs of devotional service available to us. And you can notice that anyone who's become absorbed in his or her service feels unshakable. And also always feels that I don't want to give up my service. Become very connected to the parampara and to Krishna in that service. So much so that, just as an example, Manidhar and Rohini Sutta, Prabhu, it was like 1975 or maybe 76. Prabhupada used to invite everyone to come to Mayapur and Vrindavan with him every year. There weren't as many people in ISKCON at that time. And so we'd all go there, according to, who could make it on the flight and everything like that. In fact, we used to charter our own plane. I'll go into that later. But the point is that these two devotees didn't come one year, and Prabhupada asked where they were. They said, Prabhupada, they didn't want to leave the distribution of your books. They're really absorbed and they're really enjoying it. And Prabhupada appreciated that. Of course, he didn't say, yeah, you should have all stayed home. But he definitely appreciated the fact that they were absorbed in that mood, that they didn't want to leave their service. They were fully absorbed in it. So there's no question we can feel this, a connection to the spiritual world by engaging right here in Silicon Valley. Why do devotees give up all the things that everyone else... I mean, of course, we never give up anything. There's no lack for a devotee. We live a life of abundance. Remember when my friends came to see me right after I joined the ashram in San Francisco, and it's like, are you sure you want to do this? And you sure you don't want to do this? But I remember running into a few of them a couple of years later. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, still slogging through school and all these other nothing wrong with school. but slogging through life they were, and still attached to the same old stupid stuff. And I'd probably been around the world 15 times by that time, and just living a grand old life as a brahmachari with no money and no anything is like, yay! Life's happy. So we can experience that this is the real thing. It's not some imitation. It's not some practice thing. We're actually in the process of pure devotional service under the protection of the divine energy. By serving Srila Prabhupada and the disciplic succession, we feel it. We know for ourselves this mood that the gopis had. So Prabhupada writes, and I included this in my book, $14.95, available on Amazon. Just kidding. That Prabhupada had, actually it happened in the context of a devotee, Rameshwar Prabhu, a famous devotee who was one of the pioneers in book distribution and worked on Prabhupada as right-hand servant in the BBT in the early days. And he was teaching devotees. He was giving a lot of classes that would be recorded on these things called cassettes. Kids, there were tape recorders back then. And they had cassette tapes. And those would get sent around to different people. So some of his preaching was that Sankirtan, going out to distribute books, is the mood of the gopis. And he said that actually, if somebody grabs our family business, if you have it, if not, I'll show you where you can get it. He said that this is in the mood of the gopis, bringing people back to Krishna, because this is the mood of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. She wants to engage everybody else and bring everybody else closer. And that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Radha and Krishna combined, gave the Sankirtan movement, and if you engage in this enthusiastic way of bringing people closer, then you're following the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan. I'll just read you the section because it directly quotes the letter that somebody wrote to Prabhupada. Does anybody know where it is? I haven't read this since I finished writing it. What? Oh, translation. Can you find it really quick? There's a particular section. I think it's near the end of that chapter. So, yeah, once I read this, it'll be our final point. But that's something available to everybody who sincerely gives him or herself to the process of devotional service. Right here in good old ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Okay, we don't leave Bhavani Bhakti out. So, are we having Abhishek next? Okay. I think we're good until we start to see it set up.
Yeah, I was just remembering when Shiva Chandra Prabhu was asking about whether we should discuss the deeper pastimes. I was recently studying my Canto 2, and in that it was clearly written, it was very hard for me to understand Mahat Tattva, Pradhan, and the glands, and then the Vishnus. It was very, very hard. And then the speaker said, actually, Prabhupada writes later on that all this is very easy to understand. We need to go through this easy stuff first before we can actually understand the Canto 10, which is very hard, even harder than Upanishads. And the speaker said that, Damodar Leela, how could that be hard? But there is a deeper meaning behind all these pastimes that we need to prepare ourselves before we can get into those pastimes. And the first 9 cantos prepare ourselves. And I was like, I was remembering that when Prabhu asked that question. Yeah.
There's an uncanny way. The first 9 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam are, help us unravel all of the anarthas that we have, the psychological attachments we have to the material world, so that when we are able to then enter into when we are then approaching the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we do so unburdened by those, and that's important. Nonetheless, Prabhupada gave Krishna book before all the other 9 cantos were finished. However, he included in it all the same kind of information in context that one needs to come to this clear understanding that this is not ordinary, vikreditam. Is there a drama, a play? Looks like you're getting ready for a play. Okay, this is just one little section I'll read and then we'll finish on this. Yeah, here it is, called Mood of the Gopis. Now let's hear how Srila Prabhupada practically applies this esoteric principle to those engaged in distributing his transcendental books. In 1974, at ISKCON Los Angeles, New Dwarka, Rameshwara Das, the appointed Sankirtan leader, had gleaned from Srila Prabhupada's teachings that those who distribute Srila Prabhupada's books are directly participating in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, and in doing so, following in the footsteps of Krishna's most intimate servants in the spiritual world. Here, Rameshwara gives an inkling of the mood in 1974. Quote, I began to see that the Sankirtan devotees were in direct contact with the storehouse of love of Godhead that Lord Chaitanya had broken open 500 years before, and that Srila Prabhupada had brought that same storehouse to the earth again. The Sankirtan devotees were connected to Srila Prabhupada and also, therefore, to the divine pleasure energy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through this service. It was flowing through his divine grace, filling the world with ecstasy and transcendental knowledge. Unquote. In his lectures at the New Dwarka Temple, Rameshwara repeatedly referred to the service of book distribution as a tasteful arrangement for souls to be joined in loving service to Krishna, a service that follows the mood of the gopis of Vrindavan. Rameshwara recalls that his classes about Sankirtan were going out to all the temples to enliven the book distributors, but that some devotees doubted his conclusions. Indeed, a number of devotees wondered if Rameshwara's conclusions were accurate. To clarify the matter, Nandulal Devidasi wrote to Srila Prabhupada on May 23, 1974, quote, I have heard Rameshwara Prabhu in Los Angeles say that when we are performing Sankirtan, we are engaged in the Leela of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is the union of Radha and Krishna, and he explained that just as Radharani is even more anxious to arrange for the other gopis to meet with Krishna than she is for herself to meet Krishna, and that the other gopis are also always trying to think of ways in which to arrange meetings between Radha and Krishna, so when the devotees are going out and trying to engage the suffering conditioned souls, actually what we are doing is trying to arrange for some of her lost souls to meet with Krishna once again. And that this is the Leela of Lord Chaitanya, is this the proper understanding of Sankirtan? Srila Prabhupada replied on June 9, 1974, quote, the explanation given by Rameshwara that Sankirtan is Lord Chaitanya's Leela, which he compares to the gopis trying to engage in Krishna service, is the correct understanding. Unquote. Go ahead. That this esoteric service is available even to newcomers is thus a great opportunity. Anyone who takes up the service of distributing Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books in a humble mood is at once linked to such confidential devotional service. Quote, the Sankirtan devotees are very, very dear to Krishna because you are doing the field work of book distribution. Krishna has immediately recognized them as true servants. I rest my case. Okay. Prabhu. Akurnath Prabhu.
Since we're not set up for the Abhishek, I think we have some more time. What you were just reading and talking about reminded me of some of the songs we were singing this morning, like Gaurangera Dutipada. I was thinking about the song Ohe Vaishnava Thakur, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur expresses so much respect and devotion to other devotees, and that he says, I can't carry out the Sankirtan alone, please give me a drop of faith, please give me the holy name, to a Vaishnava Thakur. And I guess my question is, number one, does that apply to all of the devotees? I mean, you were just mentioning how even the people we're trying to sell books to is like we're trying to engage them, like that they're Krishna's that they've just forgotten their service to Krishna, and we want to re-engage them like that. And how can we then treat all our other God brothers and sisters and all the other devotees with that kind of respect, even though some of them may quarrel with each other, have different opinions about what should be done and so forth? How can we encourage that mood of service to the servants of the servants?
Should be more like you, because that's what you do. You're always trying to make peace. You're always trying to present the Siddhanta, which you do so expertly. I've seen it online. I've seen it when you give class. And the way you move in the world is you're, as my godbrother Keshav, our godbrother Keshav Bharti Maharaj once said, you're guileless. You're guileless. So we should be guileless.
Hare Krishna, I can't accept.
Sorry. Just I think that you asked how we could do it, and I think that you set the mood, set the proper mood. Be careful. Yes. Okay, we're going to have a 5-minute break, so you can consider any of the points that came up, and then we're going to reconvene here. But when you sit back down, you can face the altar because we're going to have the Abhisheka ceremony. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radharani Mohan ki jai. Shri Rashtami ki jai. We'll be back here at 10:17 exactly. So please come back 10:17. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpadrishya kripasindabevacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.